Hello, my name is Mark Taylor. Welcome to the Education on Fire podcast network. This show is sponsored by the National Association for Primary Education. Do you need help and support in creating and embedding music in your school? If so, we have created Primary Music on Fire to help you with just this, a music membership site that's taking the fear out of teaching music by giving you the step-by-step skills and ongoing support you need to produce lifelong musical memories for you, your school and your pupils. Go to educationonfire.com/primary-music. Hello and welcome to the Education on Fire podcast. The place where we share creative and inspiring learning in our schools. Season 6, Episode 87. Hello, welcome to this brand new season of English and Literacy. I'm so glad you could join us, and I'm really pleased that we were able to give you some great interviews and some great insights into how different people are teaching English and literacy and how they're inspiring children in that way. And today is no exception. I'm going to be talking to Dominic Traynor, who's from the LitFilmFest, and he's going to be talking about how they use video and YouTube and film to be able to sort of use as a presentation in a way of getting children involved and inspired with English. The other thing which is fantastically exciting this season is that Mark Warner from teachingpacks.co.uk has very kindly given us a free resource each week, so a different resource each week for you to download absolutely free that you can use in your class. Having been through these resources, if you really like what they're doing, you can get an exclusive Education on Fire coupon code. You can join their membership for just £19.50 for an entire year, which is great value. So to get all the details of that, if you go to educationonfire.com/blog/teaching packs, then you will get all the details on there. Be able to download each resource each week and get that exclusive link you need for the discount code. I really hope you enjoy this season, and this is our first one with Dominic Traynor. Hello and welcome back to the Education on Fire podcast. Today I'm delighted to be joined by Dominic Traynor, and he's from the LitFilmFest. And they help schools future-proof young learners, and their award-winning projects accelerate progress in English and develop leaders for the future with the 21st century skills needed for success. And so I'm delighted to welcome Dominic to the show. Hi, Dominic.
Hi there, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. Can you just start a little bit about your education background and how you got involved in the LitFilmFest?
Yeah, of course, yes. So I initially did everything I could to avoid being a teacher because both my parents were primary school teachers, and I thought it would be a terrible thing if I followed in their footsteps. And so I kind of stayed away from teaching for as long as possible, but was doing a lot of sports coaching, a lot of drama coaching and things like that. And eventually, having worked other jobs in sort of more commercial organizations, I realized that I wanted to do something which had a little bit more, a little bit more backbone to it, or a little bit more sort of social impact. And so I decided to train to become a primary school teacher. And so I did that up in Liverpool, did my first couple of years up there as well, and then worked in an international school for a few years before coming back to the UK and working in an inner city school in London. And it was during that time that I started using, we were one of the schools who bought a load of iPads at the start without really knowing what we wanted to do with them. And I used them really heavily in my classroom, and mostly I used them for video production. So we would make really short films in the class, turn a lot of the work that we were doing on paper into something tangible that really got the kids going. It was during that time that I started to realize that engagement and progress in my own classroom was accelerating through the use of, through the methods of video production, because, the children themselves were very much into YouTube. The classic thing now when you go into any primary school classroom and you say, what do you want to be when you grow up? They're not saying footballer, they're not saying astronaut anymore, they're not saying fireman, they're saying YouTuber. And so I very much lent on that and realized that it really pushed the children to work harder in their traditional work of reading and writing at the same time, because they knew that there was that sort of reward at the end where they would be able to film it, they'd be able to put it onto, put it on the big screen. We'd watch it in class as a whole class, we'd watch things in assembly. We'd put things on our own YouTube channel. They'd share it with uncles and aunties and grandparents and parents, and there was a real sense of purpose in the work that we were doing, and that was something that I kind of looked upon in a way. At the same time, I was encouraged by somebody I knew to apply to Emerge Education. So Emerge Education is an accelerator for education ideas, to bring those ideas to a bigger audience at larger scale. And that's where LitFilmFest started. We were originally called A Tale Unfolds, but over the last few years, we've done a lot more work with the British Film Institute, for example, and they gave us the IMAX in Waterloo in order to put on a film festival where we could invite down schools who'd been using our projects so that they could see them on the bigger cinema screen in Britain. And we did that, I think it was just about 2.5, 3 years ago now. And every year, LitFilmFest has grown and grown and grown to the point where we only refer to ourselves as LitFilmFest now. And we now have, this year we're on course to engage with about 400,000 7 to 11-year-olds, all through traditional literacy and video production.
Wow, that's amazing, and that's such a great reach. And just one thing I wanted to pick up on just before we talk about anything else was I love the fact you were talking about, YouTube channels and sharing and people to be able to enjoy it together. Do you find there's a problem in terms of some sort of people being concerned about the social media, about access, about safeguarding and that kind of thing, and so your sort of advocacy of sort of sharing? How do you sort of get around that other sort of fearful idea of people putting stuff online?
Yeah, I think that it's a legitimate thought process. I think it's a really interesting one because there are still so many schools that block YouTube. And YouTube is, for teaching, possibly the greatest resource that you could possibly have. The amount of information and knowledge and, just the amount of stuff on there is incredible. So my first thing is that I don't think that any school should block YouTube. I think there are legitimate concerns. I think there's a lot of things that they can do with filters to make those concerns less and less and less. But in all the years that I taught, I don't remember any incident in which I was genuinely worried about using YouTube in the classroom. And also one of the things that I think is crucial about this is that if we aren't addressing those concerns and those issues in the classroom, then we're essentially missing out on the opportunity to educate children about not only the benefits of being able to call up any kind of information or any kind of explanation video or any sort of insight video, but we're missing the opportunity where we can actually educate children to say, well, there are good ways to use this and there are bad ways to use this, and you need to be careful of this and you need to be careful with that. If we're going to exercise a sort of a blanket ban on YouTube, then the kids will just go home and they will just figure these things out for themselves. And that's the point at which they might go down rabbit holes that we don't want them to go down, or do ill-advised things that we don't want them to do. So I think if we're going to make the most out of YouTube as a platform, we absolutely need to embrace all of the good things, all of the bad things, and talk about them in school.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I think that sort of whole sort of view of education, and I think it works best when it's relevant, doesn't it? Because you're using YouTube to find information, and then you're also using it to share the things that you're creating. And so, like I say, you have both sides of the coin, and actually understanding on how that works, both positive and negative. It's integral, really.
Yeah, exactly, because YouTube in itself is neither positive nor negative. It is exactly how the user wants to use it. And that is the same with any kind of tool, any kind of media. It's always the same. It's not the media itself. It's how people use it. And unless we're going to educate them on that, then what are we doing? And
so, in terms of people who heard the first part of the conversation and thought, yes, I'd quite like to be involved in something that's going on in London and being part of a big film festival, how does it work? What are the projects and how do people get involved in it?
Yeah, of course. So we did originally, we're based in London. although the team is from just all over the place. But we're based in London, and the IMAX was the first place that we ever did a film festival. But we have done film festivals all around the country. Last year I think there was 15 around the country, and we are really encouraging schools to do their own film festival in their own school hall, because we recognise not everyone can travel, and we recognise that also the most important community in a school is the school community. And so we're really pushing schools to be able to put on their own film festival in their own school hall, because it's as big or as small as you like. It can be a class assembly where they show a few films. It can be a whole school effort where everybody's got a film to show and they invite the parents down, for example. Or they can get involved by, contacting us and saying, we'd like to do it at a local cinema. Can you help us with that? So we do everything from a school hall to, say, the IMAX in London, for example. But in terms of the teaching resources themselves, teachers can just go to litfilmfest.com, and there are 35 hours of English projects that they can download. They're for Key Stage 1 and for Key Stage 2. Some of them have differentiated packs for those different ones. Some of them are just Key Stage 1, and the majority are just Key Stage, can be used in Key Stage 2. So they just need to go on, and everything is free, and they can download and get involved as soon as they like.
Brilliant. And have you got any examples, or maybe you can't say favourites, but things that you've enjoyed from what some schools have produced?
Yeah, of course. So one of the things with Lit Film Fest is that we like to strike a balance between children enjoying the traditional side of literacy in terms of the reading and writing side, enjoying the digital side in terms of making videos, but also we often do projects which really have, sort of a global issue involved. So, for example, this year one of our projects is called Team Tap, and it's looking at single-use bottles and how we can replace bottled water with people carrying around their own bottle, filling it up from a tap, for example. That's like a non-chronological report that people can do. We do ones on like healthy eating, for example. We're currently doing a project called Lioness Lunch with the England women's football team, the England Lionesses, where kids will look at instruction writing, but they'll look at it from a health and nutrition point of view, and what kind of food groups they need if they want to live and eat like an athlete, for example. We've done one this year with Michael Rosen, it's an interactive poetry resource which is called Why I Play, and the kids are talking about the favourite ways in which they play and creating poetry around that and creating very sort of emotive videos. And then another one is Pupil Parliaments. We do that with the Houses of Parliament as well, where kids will be looking at an issue which is important to them, and getting their local MP to come in, or writing a letter to the local MP, trying to get them to respond, which pretty much 99 times out of 100 they will, and producing their own news programs where they talk about these issues and explore the pros, explore the cons, and talk about how they might bring about a change in the law, for example. So that one's really very much around persuasive writing and citizenship and British values. And then we also have stuff which is much more of a sort of an entertainment bent. So for example, in Key Stage 1 there's a superhero trailer where they can create their own superheroes and talk about their characteristics, and then they can create a sort of really fun trailer with little effects and things like that.
That sounds like such a great broad chance for people to really sort of, even within this environment, to follow their passion or things they're interested in or things that they're concerned about or trying to make a difference. Like you say, if it's something like bottles, which obviously is very heavily in plastic in the news at the moment. So how did you go about getting people like Michael Rosen and the English ladies football team involved? How did that all come about?
I think it came about initially because about 2 years ago, we did a project called, let me get this right now, it was called Pupil Prime Minister. And it was something that we did with Peter Kilfoyle, who was a former MP, who was formerly in Tony Blair's cabinet, famously sort of walked out over the Iraq War. And he advised us on that sort of political project and gave us did some videos with us. And we were featured in The Guardian this is about 2 years ago now, and it was just before, I think it was 2 years ago, just before the general election, where they did an article about, people who are doing things in classrooms in order to teach kids about politics. And through that, the Houses of Parliament actually asked us if we would work with them on a sort of more formal basis in order to get politics into the classroom. And that was where we realised that, we built up, a following of thousands of teachers who would use our stuff regularly. And we realised that we could help get some of these issues that we saw, or some, certain strands of learning that we saw as important into the classroom. We could help organisations like Houses of Parliament, for example, help causes like environmental causes. We did one last year with change.org, where we had one class in particular who started their own change.org petition, and it got over 110,000 signatures. It was mentioned on CNN, in the Metro, Schools Week, mentioned in Parliament by Michael Gove. And so we started to realise that we could work with other organisations in order to bring maybe a wider variety of content into the classroom. Because I think, I'm an English literature graduate myself, and, I've read more books than I'd care to remember. And one of the things that I think is happening, certainly in the primary classroom, is that we are very, very focused on fiction. And when you think of primary English, it is always based around a work of fiction. There are so many good things about that, and I would never say that there wasn't, so many bonus plus points to that. But we are missing the opportunity to get in a much wider range of content into the primary English curriculum. And I think that's where we started working with people like Parliament, people like BBC Good Food, people like Michael Rosen, so that we could start to offer a wider range of English projects into the primary classroom that primary teachers could just pick up, download from the website and use straight away.
And I think, certainly from a teacher's point of view, and also I'm sort of thinking back when I was a primary pupil, which is quite a few years ago now. But that sort of sense, now we're doing English, I need to learn some spellings, or now I'm doing English and I need to write a story based on something, or now I need to write about what I did on my holidays, kind of thing. That has a very different feel than, this is something I'm really into. I'm using the skills in the English and literacy that I'm learning in order to get across what it is that I'm talking about, or the project that I'm doing. And then it all serves as a self-serving prophecy, doesn't it? Because I'm using the skills in order to get across what it is that I want, which essentially is what a large part of education is all about. You learn what you need in order to do what you want to do in life. And I think building that whole thing together is probably why it's so successful.
Yeah, I definitely think that, like I said, I'm an English literature graduate, and since my degree, I've never had to analyze a book in the same way that I did at university. Most of my literacy skills have been around doing something which has real world purpose, whether it's learning how to do a certain process, learning how to, reading instructions, reading a manual, presenting or writing a document that other people can follow, writing looking at schedule of events. And one of the things that we're very focused on is giving children real world skills. Because I think if you were to look at the primary English practice at the moment, is that we are focused on creating a generation of children who are fiction writers. And I love a good work of fiction, but that is not what the majority of people do. The majority of people use English in a very, very different way. They use it to communicate. They use it to put across ideas. They use it to create a process, or they use it to understand processes, or understand what they've got to do, or a process that they've got to go through, understand how to do their job, for example. And most people don't actually use a lot of the skills that we teach them in the classroom, certainly from a fiction point of view. And so a lot of our projects are based around, can you put across an idea, or can you campaign about something that you're passionate about? Can you follow instructions? Can you create a solid argument for why somebody should believe what you're saying or should follow what your thought process is, or look at balanced arguments, look at news reports, just dissecting news reports, delivering news reports, things that have an actual practical use. And that's not to say that fiction doesn't contain within it, the study of fiction doesn't contain with it many practical uses as well, but there should be a greater range of ways in which people or children certainly approach the subject of English.
I think that's it. It's partly moving the needle, isn't it, or the percentage point of making it relevant, and at the same time not disregarding and some of those more traditional ideas. It's just sort of having that whole, I think that whole picture of like say why it's important and how you're going to use it, and then making it relevant. And I think once all that comes together, then it becomes very exciting for everyone involved.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of children who are being told that they should really enjoy reading fiction, and they're being told that is what English is about. It's about reading fiction. It's about reading fiction. Well, a lot of children won't do that, and they won't enjoy that, and a lot of adults don't do it or enjoy it either. And that is absolutely not to say that we shouldn't be getting kids to read as much as possible. But why do they always need to read fiction? Because I know a lot of adults, and perhaps more skewed on the male side. A lot of adults don't read fiction because they might not even enjoy it, but they might enjoy reading the newspaper. They might enjoy reading a football program. They might enjoy reading a arts and crafts magazine. They might really, really enjoy that. But we're not bringing those things into the primary classroom. It's 80% fiction and 20% of something else. And I'm saying that really what we should do is we should bring a balance where, yeah, absolutely, we have a very heavy element of fiction in there because there is so much joy to be got out of that. But also we should have, maybe a 50-50 split between works of fiction and then, other things like information writing, like persuasion, like campaigning, like news reporting, all of those different things.
And thinking on a more technical front now, you talked about it being a film festival. What type of technology and recording devices do you need in order to sort of take part in this sort of thing?
That is a really common question that we get, and people have this idea that we're talking about something really, really professional, and we're absolutely not. I mean, when I first started getting into using video production in the classroom, I used a flip cam, which, for all of those teachers who can remember, was a sort of handheld device about the size of, I guess, like a phone, and slightly thicker maybe, and it just had a pop-out USB that you would put into your computer, and essentially you would record and then put it straight into the computer and download it straight onto your hard drive. And that we some of the most enjoyable or entertaining films that I've ever made were just made through that. And I think everybody has a smartphone. Most or a lot of schools will have iPads, and that is absolutely all that you need. If you've got something which can record a video, from sort of 720p, I mean, even less is fine, but 720p is where you get a nice, crisp picture, and then somewhere where you can film where it's, quiet enough where it picks up the sound, that's absolutely can be done in a classroom. That's all that you need. If you can throw in a fancy tripod, that's great, but you don't need it. If you can use a sound, an external microphone, that's great, but you don't need it. If you can include a bit of green screen in there, that's great, but you don't need it. So the barrier to using film and creating videos in the classroom is very much a self-imposed barrier if you want to put it in place. Otherwise, you can do that with your standard smartphone would be absolutely perfect. And actually, there's been a lot of Hollywood films that have been made using a mobile setup, which have won all sorts of awards. It's absolutely not a barrier to entry at all. I think the reason why I'm sort of going on about it to such an extent is because teachers automatically come with that barrier, and it's a non-existent barrier because everybody does have the technology to make it happen in the classrooms.
And just sort of one step on from there, you're going to have to put it onto a hard drive or upload it somewhere and all that sort of thing. Are those sorts of resources and sort of trainings available through your website as well, or is that something that actually a teacher or the class would need to be able to do themselves?
Yeah, I mean, we do. We often train schools in those kind of things. We're about to go into pretty much a whole week of doing that next week, and that is, part of our bread and butter. But I would absolutely say that teachers can do it themselves, and we're happy to, handhold them through that process. But if there's a teacher listening who is like, well, I'd really like to try that for myself, well, use whatever device you've got. You can, if it's something like Adobe Spark Video would be the perfect way to get started. It's one of the easiest video editing softwares out there. It's app-based, it's web-based, it's completely free. You can set up class accounts so the kids can have a go, and that is one of the easiest ways that you can get going. Obviously other things like iMovie, a lot of people have that for free on their iPad or iPhone. That's an excellent one to do as well. But yeah, it's very, very simple. I mean, everything that myself, that me and my team have learned how to do, we've done that through, watching YouTube videos, having a mess around with it ourselves. Anybody can be proficient in using iMovie and Adobe Spark Video, within half an hour maximum. And Adobe Spark Video, you could get going in 5 minutes, and you'd be as pro as anything that we could teach you to do.
That's fantastic, and we'll have links to lots of these things on the show notes if you go to Education on Fire, and if you put Dominic Traynor in the search bar, it will pop up, and we'll have all those things on there as well. And one thing I really liked about what you said there was the fact that even if it's something you don't know, that process of actually going out and finding how to do it or doing a quick search for something is something which is actually an incredibly important learning process as well.
Absolutely. I mean, the teacher is not the authoritative figure. The teacher is the first learner, and the teacher should be, open about learning new things and and a lot of the time we see that children in the class will teach the teacher, and I think that's great, and I think that should be embraced, and I think kids should feel like that they too can teach other people, and whether that person is an adult or a child, it doesn't matter who teaches who. I mean, certainly a tool like Adobe Spark Video, a 5-6-year-old child can use that and will get going with that very, very quickly. And a teacher can do the same. It's just, they just need to spend the time or just block off 20 minutes to actually go and look at it.
And I think the thing is about these great project ideas is the fact that it becomes very collaborative, doesn't it? And people use the skills they have already, and they can help teach other people, like say whether it's peer-to-peer or student to teacher, or whichever way that comes. I think it's a really great learning experience for everybody.
That's one of the reasons why we're such big advocates of video production, and it's not because we think making films is the be all and end all. As a teacher, I don't mind what the method is. I'm just after the most effective method to get my children to the next level. But what we found is video production does all of those things. Not only does it, because any video production is, 80-90% about traditional literacy of taking it, researching, planning, reading things, making notes, discussing things, then writing drafts, writing final pieces of work before you go to film. And so that it's that 80-90% of traditional work, but the last 10 to 20% is that sort of digital media YouTube carrot, which gets children in the YouTube generation as they are now, gets them interested. It also gets them using digital skills, which is one of those things that they're going to need really, really crucially. They're going to need that in the future. So we get those into the classroom as well, but we also get teamwork, we get collaboration, we get problem solving, we get presentation skills, all of those 21st century skills which kids are going to need really, really badly in the future. We can do those through video production, which brings together that traditional element of English learning with those future skills that they're going to need.
And you mentioned early on about the fact that it's free to access all this stuff. So you've got some quite impressive sponsors and people that are involved, and is that the reason you're able to provide that at no cost?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, one of the things that as a team of primary school teachers ourselves, one of the things is that we recognise is that school budgets aren't necessarily the easiest things to work with. There's not a lot of money around at the moment, and teachers, should they be spending their own money on things? Well, perhaps they should, perhaps they shouldn't. But we wanted to take that barrier to entry away. We wanted to make sure that there was absolutely every opportunity for schools or individual teachers to come to us and say, I'd really like to give that a go in the classroom. And for it not to be a barrier through cost, for it not to be a barrier through technology, it just takes time and it takes effort. And we wanted to make sure that our sponsors provided those opportunities for schools.
And why did you also go down the route of actually having some research done? I mean, you did some things with UCL, is that correct?
Yeah, so we were part of the Institute of Education's Educate program earlier this year. They invited applications from companies, and we were selected to prove the efficacy of what we did. And that is always a really sort of interesting thing in schools, because there's a lot of things that happen in school which are done because they were always done that way. And one of the things that the Educate program from the Institute of Education is trying to do is trying to look at things and say, well, okay, you've always done it that way, but does it actually work? Does it make any difference? And so we did a 4-month research project where we worked with 3 schools. So it was 200 pupils, and we put them through one whole term of using nothing but LitFilmFest projects to see whether that elements of video production was making a difference, to see whether it was making any difference academically, see if it was making any difference in terms of pupil engagement as well. And what we found was that over those 3 to 4 months was that the average child made 3.75 times the national average rate of progress in English. So that was one absolutely major finding. And then also that on average, they enjoyed their English lessons 50% more than they had done previously. So those 2 things were really the cornerstone of what we advocate, is that this kind of approach to literacy, which brings in digital skills, which brings in presentation skills, which brings in 21st century skills. When you combine that with traditional literacy, you get this huge acceleration in not only academic progress, but also the pupils' willingness to engage, because you're making it more relevant for them to their own lives and to how they see themselves as the YouTube generation, how video is a huge part of their life. And when you put those 2 things together, that's where the magic happens. And we wanted to do that research so that we could definitively say to schools, well, we've proven this methodology, albeit in a small sample size of 3 schools, 200 kids, but it's a lot more robust than just saying, oh, I think you should do this because the kids like it. We're actually showing that it has academic value.
It sounds very exciting, and I have to say it's something which I'd certainly recommend if I was now working in a primary school, because I think my kids, having gone through that age, would absolutely love it, and actually having sort of done some of those sorts of things off their own back as well. I know how much they've enjoyed it. So just remind us again of the website and where they can go and find out all the resources and all the information they need if they'd like to take part.
So go to litfilmfest.com, and within there you'll be able to look around at all the resources that we've got, all the free resources, and then also the research behind it. It's all over the website.
That's brilliant. Dominic, thanks so much for chatting to me. It's been really interesting, and also I find it really exciting for the future and exciting for teachers and the pupils that can get involved in that kind of thing. And I wish you all the best for the future. And I'm really, really interested in sort of keeping in touch and actually sort of seeing how this sort of develops as you go further down the track.
Brilliant. Well, it's been a pleasure. It's nice to talk about it, and also nice to get the word out to teachers so that they can use it for themselves.
Lovely. Thanks so much for chatting.
No problem.
Thanks for listening to the Education on Fire podcast. For more information of each episode and to get in touch, go to educationonfire.com. Education is not the filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire.